Hey, I'm James from Smokin' Dad Barbecue, and today you're in for a treat. We are going to be reverse searing a Wagyu ribeye steak on the Kamado Joe Jr. But this cook is going to be a little bit different than some of my other videos for a few reasons. One, this came together really last minute. Wasn't planning to do this cook today, but what changed my mind and to get outside and fire up the Joe Jr. is this guy arrived. This is the new Kamado Joe sear plate, which has two different cast iron surfaces, and I couldn't wait to try it. And since the excitement got the best of me, I didn't plan a steak for this cook 24 hours ahead of time. And I thought this is actually something that many of you are running into, which is last minute you see a nice steak at the grocery store or your butcher, and you just want to go ahead and grab that. So I found this gorgeous Wagyu ribeye from my local butcher, Peter at J&G's in Aldershot. You should go check them out if you're in the southwestern Ontario area. But since I didn't dry brine that, I want to walk you through how I season and prep a steak if I've just brought it home from the store, and the plan is to get grilling right away. So I've just taken it out of the fridge and let it start to come up to room temperature. We'll go inside in a minute and season that. But first, I want to start getting ready for our reverse sear. So we're going to get some heat in our Joe Jr. Let's go ahead and add some Jealous Devil fuel and fire it up. Okay, today I'm going to be using the torch from JJ George, and let's light it up. Okay, so just like we do when we're lighting up our Big Joe or our Classic, we want to go ahead and let some temperature get in our dome before installing our indirect cooking heat deflector as well as our grid. So I'm gonna aim to reverse sear this around 250 to 270 degrees. So I'm gonna go ahead and wait till I see 250 to 270 degrees in the dome before adding everything. And then we'll let that temperature recover. And as we start to come back towards that 270 mark, that's when we'll start shutting down our bottom air vent and then our top air vent. While this is coming up to temperature, let's start to season up and get our Wagyu ribeye ready to go. All right, that was quick. I know sooner went in to get our steak and we are already just shy of 400 degrees. So let's go ahead and start to bring our bottom vents down to 2 fingers width. And now we will install our heat deflector and our cooking grid. And this has space for the notches, just like so. And adjust our top vent. I'm gonna leave it wide open for the time being until we start to recover temperature. Okay, so while our Joe Jr. is stabilizing, let's go ahead and season up our Wagyu ribeye. So for a binder, I'm gonna use some hot sauce. This is black truffle infused hot sauce, just has a great umami flavor. I like any hot sauce. If you have Frank's, buffalo sauce, doesn't really matter. You're just gonna get a little bit of extra depth. So whatever you have accessible will work. Or if you don't like the hot sauce as a binder, olive oil, duck fat spray are good options. I'll go ahead and link to this if you wanna find the bottle and know what to look for, either on Amazon or your local store. It goes great with a lot of stuff. All right, so now we have a binder applied. What I'm gonna go and do next is apply some garlic powder. Then I'm going to use some smoked sea salt. There's 3 sea salts that I really like, or 3 salts. I like Diamond Kosher for dry brining. I like the smoked sea salt for things like this where we're building some flavor, or if we're doing a soup or a chili and you want some of that smoked flavor. And then the 3rd salt that I like, we'll use actually at the end of this video, which is a finishing salt. If we just need any more salt flavor pop, we'll go ahead and apply that. If you're looking for those names instead of jotting it down, I'll put a link below to each of them. All right, we're nearly back up to temperature. I've just added a bit more air to speed that up. And today we're gonna go ahead and use the Inkbird numbers, letters, confusing name, just because I left it out here from my last video, so that was really convenient. So I'm just gonna go ahead and insert a probe. Just a quick tip on the probe direction in terms of when you insert it. I found that if you insert just like this down the middle, you tend to sometimes not get the most accurate reading, because what happens is that's the coolest part and you're waiting for the temperature to get down. So you actually have well done areas and maybe that last piece of medium rare. And so if you go by that for your temperature, it tends to overshoot. I found you actually get a far more accurate reading off of your probe if you go ahead and insert it. Ooh, bees. Okay, he's gone. So if you go ahead and insert it, not going past the middle, but on a down angle like that. Let's go ahead and open up our Joe Jr. And I'll just slide a second probe here in the front so we can keep track of our temperature on this cook. And let's go ahead and throw on our ribeye. Looks good. All right, let's close that up. Let's close that to about 2/8 or so of an inch are visible on all the daisy wheel pedestals. We'll just track that, see where we're at for temperature, and let that settle in. Our ink bird is reading 309. It was just shooting up quickly, so 305, so it's dropping back down now that we've gone and adjusted our vents. We'll just make a few adjustments after about 5-10 minutes, see if we're stable, and then we'll be good to let this cook. Okay, so for a quick recap, that was about 20 minutes in real time from adding our charcoal, getting our fire started, letting some heat come up into our Kamado Joe Jr. Once we hit our target temperature, we went and added our heat deflectors as well as our cooking grid, and then started to adjust our vents just so the temperature landed right around where we want it. So currently our temperature is 270 degrees, bang on. So really happy with where that's landed. Go ahead and give this about 20 minutes or so, and then I'll take a look, maybe flip it if it looks like that might help. And then we'll let it finish off maybe another 20 minutes or until we get to our target internal temperature. Now, I like normally pulling steaks off around 114 degrees and then letting them continue to carry over and cook during the rest. But I've actually been finding that with Wagyu, we get a little bit better if we go just a step further. So I'm thinking, 120 to 125 is when I might take this off, let it rest, and have that temperature start to come backwards while we get our Joe Jr. just flying and get that cast iron really hot so we can do our sears on the 45-degree lines. So that's the game plan. I'll rejoin you in a little bit. All right, so we are about 35 minutes into our cook using the sear plate in an indirect setup. Now it's time to turn it into what it's actually meant for, which is that searing plate. So our Wagyu ribeye has just crossed the 120-degree mark. So what I'm gonna do now is bring you a little bit closer so we can take a look at it, take it off, put it on a plate, and we're gonna not touch that. We're gonna leave it uncovered. That's gonna serve as a bit of our rest, and it's also gonna help that internal temperature stop racing forward. If you haven't heard this analogy before, I think one of the easiest ways I can explain it is think about the difference between cruise control on your car. So if you were cooking, sous vide, for example, at 120 degrees. Once the steak reaches that temperature, it just stays there and it coasts, and it's like being on cruise control. So the minute you remove the heat, you start to slow down. If we're cooking at 270 degrees, that's like trying to stop exactly at 60 miles an hour from full throttle. So you just nail it, you're accelerating the gas and the car's really accelerating, and then you let off and you still have some carryover acceleration. And so that's why we want to back up our points where we take off our food a little bit earlier, just to make sure that we don't accidentally go well beyond what we want. So I think we're there now. Let's go ahead and get that off and let it rest on a plate. So what we're going to do now is build up our fire. So I'm going to give it max airflow on the bottom as well as the top. And just stoke our fire here, get our jealous devil charcoal rip roaring. And what we'll do now is we'll add that sear plate back as we had it, but directly on the fire ring this time. So I'll just go ahead and slide that down. So that way this will just continue to build up heat. We could have added this at this point and used the regular cooking grid, but just in case the heat started to come up too quick, I didn't want to shock the cast iron. And so I liked using it for the reverse sear portion and that just helped sort of let it heat soak a little bit, soak up some of that energy. So now when we crank the heat, we're not going from cold cast iron to really, really hot cast iron in a short period of time. So let's open up our vents and let this come up to searing temperatures. We'll keep an eye on our ribeye, but already I can see that sitting on the plate over here, I don't know if that's in shot of the camera. Well, I can't quite reach. There we go, close. That is now at 126 degrees. So that's continued to rise already a couple of degrees beyond where we took it off. But that's all right, we planned for that. So 127 now, so that's good. So I think that might continue to creep upwards towards about 129 degrees and then start to go the other way. At the same time, our Joe Jr. will be flying and we'll get our heat up. And I think the perfect combination would be if we taper back down into the low 120 degrees on our internal temperature when we're ready to sear it. We'll get about 30 seconds per side on one direction, flip it and do 30 seconds again in the opposite orientation. If that didn't make sense as I'm explaining it, all makes sense once we're actually there. So I'll rejoin you when we're ready to sear. All right, we capped out at about 132 degrees Fahrenheit on our Wagyu ribeye before starting to go the other way. And I still think that'll be about perfect, given Wagyu has more intermuscular fat and that extra heat will help render it out. But we'll find out together in a couple minutes. But before that, it's time for my favorite part of the evening, Inferno mode. So we actually want a little bit less Inferno mode than what our Joe Jr. and our Jealous Devil charcoal is capable of. If we started to let this go up to 800-900 degrees, I think we'll just end up burning the meat instantly versus getting that Maillard reaction. So I'm aiming for about 600 degrees on our dome temperature, which we're just about hitting right now. And I'm gonna start actually slowing that down so we don't go much further, because that cast iron sitting right above that hot coal will soak in even more heat. I don't have an infrared gun, but I suspect it'll be a little bit hotter than that. So I think that'll be about the perfect temperature for about a 30 seconds, rotate 30 seconds, flip 30 seconds, rotate again 30 seconds. We'll find out. These are just our estimates. We'll see if that plan comes together exactly as we expect it to in a couple minutes. I'll move the camera really close so you don't miss any of the action. Okay, since our steak's fully cooked, I'm gonna go ahead and leave the dome open for this part. I don't wanna add a whole lot more internal cooking. We just wanna get our sear. So let's go ahead and take our ribeye here. Oh, this looks good. And we'll start the clock. Just give that a little positive pressure. I don't know if you can see that, but that looks pretty good to me. Let's go ahead and let this rest. Shut down our vents, bottom vent first. Give this a couple minutes to chill out with the top vent still open, but a little bit towards the closed side. That'll just help cool that raging fire. After that's had a minute to settle down, we'll go ahead and close that the rest of the way. All right, let's slice into this and see how we did. First, gonna go right down the middle here. Oh, nailed it. Look at that. Perfect reverse sear. Got a great crust on the outside and just juices galore inside. Why don't we go ahead and take a slice off here, chef's privilege. And I'm actually gonna cut this into two. I'm gonna try one without some salt. And then the other one, I've got that fleur de sel salt that I mentioned with the link in the description, which is an amazing finishing salt, but we don't wanna go ahead and add that until we've had a chance to see what our salt content is like. So let me just move the camera and we'll try this together. Man, our Joe Jr. looks like it did a good job, but enough speculating if it did. Let's find out. We'll dig in here for our taste test. So I'm gonna start first with a piece with no salt, like I said, just to see if it needs that finishing salt. This is really just how I justify pitmaster privilege, getting a sample before anyone else does, to check the salt, make sure it's safe, you know, for the kids. Wow. It's been a while since I've had Wagyu, and every time you skip it for a little while, you just forget the incredible flavor that you had, or that it has. I'm lost for words. This is a gross analogy and everyone hates it, but I can't think of anything better. If you're from the 80s and you had those candies, you know, gushers, where they just explode with flavor, it's like that, but with beef. Incredible. So if that grossed you out, it's not gross, it's really, really good. But I can't help but wonder how this is gonna be with a little bit of our fleur de sel finishing salt. So let me go ahead and add just a dash of that. Just really so we can go Salt Bay. See how that is. Even better. I love that salt. It just wakes everything up. That is amazing. So we nailed it. First cook with the sear plate. Really happy with how it performed. Like many of you, I've been waiting since spring for our Kamado Joe Classic 3 that I ordered to arrive. I don't have it, and so I went over to a neighbor's house to confirm that the sear plate fits the bottom of the divide and conquer rack. It absolutely fits perfectly, so I can't wait for that to arrive. So I'll be able to use it as we showed today on the top position of the Joe Jr., on the fire ring for searing, as well as nice and low in our Kamado Joe Classic, if and when it eventually arrives. Let me know. I think we have some great ideas in terms of some setups that we can do once it arrives. Let me know in the comments if there's anything that you want to see, or in terms of me testing or cooking. Be more than happy to respond. Until then, I'm James from Smoking Dead Barbecue, signing off. Have a good one.